Hi, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thank you for joining us today. We are with Esmy Jimenez, who is in the Tri-Cities today, but normally she's based in Yakima. Thank you, Esmy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Now, do you sound excited? I think you sound excited. Can we say that you're very excited to be here?
I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, there it is. All right, so we're going to be talking today about some housing issues happening in Central Washington and the farm labor shortage that's also happening at the same time. Real intriguing stuff going on there. Also about some Filipino veterans that were recently honored in the Yakima area. And up in Roslyn, a historic cemetery that's gotten a facelift, and some really interesting stuff at that cemetery if you want to go visit it over the upcoming 4th of July weekend. So if you have any questions along those topics or other topics that Esmy covers in Central Washington, ask those in the comment section on Facebook, and we'll try to get to them now or after the live stream. So Esmy, first of all, Yakima housing shortage. There's a little bit of a housing crunch, or a lot of a housing crunch, I should say, as well as some issues involving a shortage of farm labor. So the long and short of it, though, you're telling me that not everyone in the world is moving just to Seattle, that they're moving to other parts of the state?
It's true. The rumors are true.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yakima has actually the second lowest vacancy rate for apartments in the entire state. So while we see Seattle, Portland, even parts of BC having, these rental problems happening, these housing crunches happening, in Yakima, it's less than 1%, which is really hard on the community because a lot of people are low income. I think half of the population there is actually, or 1 in 5 people in Yakima County are considered in poverty. And this is especially affecting low income farm workers.
At the same time, there is a farm labor shortage, and there's this issue around what we call H-2A workers, right? So a lot of people might not have heard that term. Why are there so many H-2A workers being kind of brought in from outside the U.S. To help with the harvest?
That's a good question. So H-2A workers, for those that don't know, are temporary agricultural workers. A lot of them come from Mexico, but sometimes they come from the Philippines or Jamaica or other parts of the world. They're especially used in Washington for apple harvest and cherry harvest, and that's happening because farmers aren't able to actually find labor here in Yakima County, Benton County, and lots of parts of central and eastern Washington. So they're actually having to put in applications through the Department of Labor at the federal level, and actually having these people come in for those seasons, and then they have to house them, they have to feed them, they have to transport them there and back from work into where they're housing them, and also from their home countries. So it's really expensive for farmers, but it's unfortunately the thing that they're having to do in order to make sure all this fruit is actually picked on time.
Okay, so in response to that, a recent development, I guess is the right word, but a recent housing complex has opened there in Yakima, and a prominent farmer in the area is kind of helping lead that effort. But there's some tensions between others in the community who might not think it's the right solution at the right time. What's going on with the Fairbridge Hotel there in Yakima?
Yeah, so the Fairbridge Hotel was actually revamped. It's now going to hold up to 800 beds for temporary workers, the H-2A workers we were just talking about. Rob Valikoff of Valikoff Fruits is leading that along with WAFLA, formerly the Washington Farm Labor Association. And so what's happening there is that some people from the community are saying this is going to displace people who live there year round. So the problem here is that we're kind of seeing two different farm worker groups. One that are the H-2A workers. They come here legally, they come here for short periods of time, they return to their home countries, whereas sometimes there's people with or without documentation who live here in the U.S. year round, but maybe they move around and follow the harvest. And so the problem is that these two factions, so to speak, sometimes can displace each other. And some activists are saying that this could happen in Yakima because what could happen is that farmers would start actually buying hotels, they could start buying apartment complexes and housing their own workers there.
And just real quickly, though, while we're on the topic of housing shortages, it's not just unique to Yakima or to the west side of the state, but elsewhere in central Washington. I know you were aware of some stuff happening up there in the Kittitas Valley as well, right?
Yeah, so Kittitas Valley is the county in the state that's having the most difficulty with vacancy rates. So it's really hard for people to find rentals, especially affordable ones. And like we said, sometimes people think, it's only happening in big cities, but it's actually happening all over the state, and it's hitting rural communities especially hard.
Fascinating. We'll continue to watch that. Thanks for your reporting on that front. Okay, so shifting over to another topic, maybe a little more fun or just a little more heartwarming, if you will. So you recently covered the awarding of some maybe a long time coming medals for service to Filipino veterans who are there in the Yakima area, most of whom have since passed on, but one of whom was still alive, and you talked to him, named Gregorio Azarin. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. I apologize. Is that it? Okay. So tell us a little bit about meeting Gregorio.
So that's Mr. Azarin Gregorio. He's turned 93 last month. And he actually joined the military in the Philippines when he was 17, but claiming to be 18. And so he actually served in the war effort. What happened is that there was a long history for a minute with the Rescission Act of 1946, which sounds like a long time ago, and it definitely was. But we definitely have people that are still alive from that time period. And so what happened is that a lot of Filipino veterans didn't actually have access to a lot of the benefits that typical veterans would receive. And it wasn't actually till 2009, under the Obama administration, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, where a lot of these Filipino veterans were given those benefits that, didn't come for so long. And so now he's receiving these benefits. He actually got a Congressional Gold Medal Award, and he was really, really proud. His wife was there. The whole Filipino community in Wapato was there to support him, and it was really cool to see that happen.
And I loved the story that you did, and when you did it for radio, you had this little bit about, at the very end of the story, about how he still rides his bike around, right? I just love that.
Yeah, there's this little bit at the end where he was like, well, I'm still young enough to ride around my bicycle. And I was like, that's excellent. It's a really great spirit that he has.
If I'm still alive on this earth at age 93, which is definitely probably not going to happen given my current lifestyle, but living on the edge, I hope to be able to ride a bike. Probably not, though.
Never know.
Yeah, okay, so moving on into back up into the Kittitas Valley up there, the upper part of the valley in Roslyn, which a lot of people might be familiar with, the Brick Tavern, kind of this historic tavern that is very famous, and it was the town was the setting of the TV show Northern Exposure in the 1990s. But there's also this historic cemetery there in Roslyn, or cemeteries, I guess it's a collection of several. And you were recently doing a story on there. Tell us a little bit about just the context of those historic cemeteries in Roslyn.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, I had heard that the Roslyn Cemetery was really neat. A lot of friends were like, you have to go up there. There's a lot of stories. And luckily there was a story happening when I visited up there. But so for those who don't know, Roslyn hosts this really big historic cemetery. It's 19 acres. There's 5,000 graves. And there's, over a dozen different ethnicities. And so they're actually enclosed into different ones. So there's a Croatian cemetery, there's a Slovak cemetery. It's broken down by lodges of the time that were very popular. So it's really interesting to walk around because you tour not just the cemetery, but the different people who congregated together and wanted to be buried in the same plots. And so I went up there because the Consul General of Croatia was coming up. They were setting up these Croatian monuments to honor the people who came and actually mined that area, over 100 years ago. And so it was really, really cool to see the kind of festivals and to honor the people that gave their life and gave their time to work in those areas.
Okay, right. And when you were working on this story, I was talking about, oh, you're going to this Croatian cemetery. And I said, my family has Croatian roots. My mom's side is all there. They immigrated in the 1940s. And I said, and I even have a Croatian flag on my wall at home. And you said, no, you don't. Well, I brought it in just to show you that I indeed have a Croatian flag. This is from my home, and now it's here in the studio with us. So as Croatia is going to be playing in the World Cup of soccer tournament, I have to, wave pride for Croatia. So that's my plug. And as speaking of which, in World Cup news, I know you're a soccer fan, or you talked about your fandom of soccer or football. Who are you pulling for in the World Cup this year?
I mean, I probably Latin America, specifically Mexico, but also Nigeria.
Yes, because Nigeria is playing Croatia. Thank you. Well, if anyone out there has some soccer or football loyalties, and tell us who you are rooting for in the World Cup this year. We'd love to see that. As well as, I should say, going back to the cemetery story, when we were talking about your story about the cemeteries and we posted it online, we said, what are some other historic cemeteries around the Northwest that we might want to visit? And some people responded. But continuing, if you have cool historic places, cemeteries or otherwise in the Northwest that you think we should get to, that Esmy might like to visit, let us know there in the comments section on Facebook, and we will try to get to them. Esmy has a full summer of travel ahead of you, right?
Tell me, where should I go, right? We want to uncover these stories, and I know people here in the Northwest have a lot of different hidden places, and I would love to see them and be able to, bring a microphone to it.
And real quickly, speaking of ethnicities and ceremonies for that are celebrating cultures and maybe religions, just real quickly, you have been today looking at the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and happening there in Central Washington, some celebrations. Well, what's going to be coming up here probably today or over the weekend on that?
So there was a celebration at the Islamic Center of Tri-Cities today. I was told there was like 300 to 400 people there. It's the one that's here, so people all the way from Walla Walla, Moses Lake will actually drive and come all the way to the Tri-Cities one because it's the only one around within a radius of 60 miles. So it was really cool. There was a lot of kids, there was food, people outside, bounce houses, even like ponies, so kids were getting on it and riding around. It was really cool to see the end of Ramadan and see the way that people were celebrating.
Well, look for that story upcoming from NWPB on radio and online at nwpb.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, Esmy.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us here on Facebook Live. We do it every Friday at noon where we talk about news here in the unique Northwest.